Hi, and welcome to Mrs. PM Reads. We've got a little bit of Cora sitting here as she's wanting me to pet her, which is not, and she loves to get her tail petted. Anyway, we are reading Shoeless Joe by W.P. Kinsella. And I believe, come on, silly girl. I believe this is part 3, section 4. And in the last video, Ray and Jerry had been talking to all kinds of people about Moonlight Archie Graham, and they have discovered his obituary. And it seems like, he's a pretty nice guy, and people really were going to miss him when he was gone, which at this point he passed away. I don't remember when, but he's no longer with us. All right, so let's go ahead and continue. Hi, baby. Fine. By the time I get to the nearby country kitchen restaurant for breakfast, I find Salinger surrounded. Like the Pied Piper, he has accumulated a flock of followers. Several tables have been pushed together, and he sits at the head, drinking coffee and making notes. As I squeeze in beside him, I can feel the room get quiet. Salinger gulps the last of his coffee, excuses himself. Those around the table are mostly men, past retirement. Past retirement age. I have not been introduced, but the men obviously know I am connected with Salinger, and after a long, uneasy silence, they begin talking to me. Everybody's talking about you too, says Lewis, a stocky, balding man with a broad face and bent nose. Mario and Frank, and he waves his hand to indicate 2 others at the table. Now she's rubbing herself on the computer. That's why it's moving a little bit. Anyway, Mario and Frank came over to my place last night, and we told Doc Graham stories until after midnight. I bet it was the same all over town. I have some stories to tell you. I even wrote some of them down. He drags from the pocket of his plaid shirt a lined paper ripped from a coiled ring scribbler, the left edge ragged. Memories, a funny thing, he goes on. It's like all those memories we have of Doc Graham had gone to sleep and sunk way down inside us. He pats his ample tummy, but once you started asking about him and started us talking about him, why, they swum right up to the surface again. It's almost like you brought Doc back to life. This morning, while I was walking down here, I looked south from Lake Street, down 3rd, toward the school, and I thought I'd seen him. His white hair bobbing along, his black overcoat open, like it always was, even if it was 50 below zero. And him carrying an umbrella like he always did. He claimed he carried it out of habit, for something to hang on to and to beat away all the lady admirers. And he used to laugh about that. Only the umbrella he was carrying must have belonged to his wife, because it was all pale blue and silky and had little flowers growing out of it. She always wore blue. I bet you didn't know that. My wife was a student of hers. Anyway, you see what you've gone and done? I'm seeing Doc Graham walking down the street like he was, 30 years ago. And him wearing his overcoat in June. The memory sure does strange things sometimes. He's been dead about 20 years now. You should write about the living. To heck with the dead, says a gruff voice from the end of the table. but he is quickly shouted down, and everyone present passes me one or more bits of information about Doc Graham. Alicia did like blue. Doc used to buy hats for her, most always blue one with lots of flowers on them. I think the store used to order in blue hats because they knew Doc would buy them. When they tore down the old school after Doc retired, why, they found a half a dozen hat boxes in his closet with brand new hats in them. I wonder if anybody ever told Alicia. It would tickle her to know if she's still alive. The man who said crossly that I should write about the living is now pacing up and down behind me, racking his brains, stopping frequently to put his hand on my shoulder. Let me tell you a story, he says finally, tapping his glasses frame. Doc gave me my first pair of glasses, but that's not the story. Doc has many pockets in his suit as a magician. Why, he'd rush in and out, he'd reach in and out would come an orange or a peanut or some candy, or there'd be a silver flash, and he'd pop a dime into the hand of each child he'd meet. Doc had money in every pocket, and not just silver. He gave away more free glasses than any man in Minnesota. Can you imagine a doctor giving away eyeglasses today? I thought of him like he was a Joe DiMaggio, says a quiet man who declines to elaborate. He wrote by moving his paper up and down under the pen, and he used to chew up his prescription slips, so he was always looking for scraps of paper, and sometimes his patients used to have to dig into their pockets for a piece of paper so Doc could write a prescription. I went with him to make a house call up at one of the camps, says a woman who has not spoken before. The husband was sick, and they had no heat, no stove. When we got back to Chisholm, Doc went to the hardware store and bought a stove for them and paid to have it delivered. And I bet that wasn't the only time he did something like that. He could show you every spot where there had ever been a hitching post in Chisholm. He had that kind of mind. And that man, he had an arm on him, said another. Feel my muscles, he used to say to us boys. Never put on an extra pound in his life, and used to brag that he never let another doctor examine him. One day, over at the ballpark, he wandered down from the stands after a game. Let me see that ball, he said to us, and one of us tossed him the ball. He studied it for a minute, looked at it so long I thought he'd forgotten what he was going to do with it. And then he walked over behind home plate, cranked up his arm in a kind of comical way, reared back, and fired that ball over the left field fence. And it was still rising when it disappeared. He just smiled and looked at us, nodded, and then he wandered off, shuffling along, looking kind of lost the way he always did. But what an arm. There ain't many young men could have done that. 335 feet it was, and him at least 50 at the time. A hell of an arm. Doc came here in 1909, just after most of the town burnt up. He grew up with the town. Chisholm's a mining town, always has been, always will be. Whole area is called the Iron Range. Town used to have 10,000 people, but we're down to 4,000 now. All the underground mines are closed, just strip mining left. Needed a lot of men to dig in the old days. There was mining camps like sores all over the hills, but the mines were good to the town, better than most big industries. They paid for the doctors to come and brought in the first teachers and built the schools. It wasn't all take. They put back into the community. Even in the 30s, there was a market for iron ore, so we hardly felt the depression up here. Back at the newspaper office, Vida Ponikvar hands me the small wallet-sized photo of Moonlight Graham in his New York Giant uniform. She passes it to me as a bishop might hand a religious object to a peasant, formally, hoping against hope that no harm will come to it. I hold it in both hands as I am receiving the sacrament. I'm tempted to offer to leave my watch or wallet or belt as security, something tangible to prove that I intend to get it back to her safely. I carry it off to Chisholm's only photo studio and order reprints, pay for them to be mailed to Iowa, and extract a solemn promise from the photographer to return the photo to Vida as soon as he's finished with it. On the way to the motel, I buy a newspaper, a Chicago Tribune, thick as a folded bath towel. On an inside page, above a 2-column story, the shape of a paperback book, is the headline, J.D. Salinger, missing. In summary, the story states only that a relative in California notified police after receiving no answer to repeated telephone calls. The piece concludes by saying that there are no known clues and that the police, for the moment, state they do not suspect foul play. I show the paper to Jerry. He goes immediately to the phone and places a call to his son in California. I decide to leave him alone and head across to the Country Kitchen restaurant for coffee and an apple dumpling. The apple dumplings may be addictive. I picture myself years in the future, toothless, in rags, begging quarters in front of the Country Kitchen. Spare change, sir? I only need 35 cents more for the apple dumpling. 60 cents and I can have cinnamon ice cream with it. God bless you, sir. My son says they're camped in his driveway, way out there. Can you imagine it? Explodes Jerry when I return to the room. They're probably breaking up my Jeep and selling the pieces for souvenirs. He laughs a little wildly and shakes his head. My son's going to issue a bulletin. He'll say he's had a call from me and that I'm in a monastery in Peru eating goat cheese and contemplating the meaning of life. That's what they expect. I told him to say that because I'm thinking of changing my name to Dusty Chisholm because I'm planning to write a Western novel. But he says that's too silly. He has a level head, my son. You must be getting lots of material out of this trip, I say to Salinger late that evening as we linger over the apple dumpling at the restaurant. I am on my second one. I get abusive if I eat more than one, says Cherry. You wouldn't want to have to bail me out, would you? We smile. Then his expression changes. Material? Like what? As he looks at me, the tension lines between his eyebrows deepen, and I realize I have ventured over that mystical line into a writer's domain, a place where I do not belong. I can think of nothing to do with the stories I've gathered about Doc, except tell them to Salinger, who, to my consternation, makes no notes. Doc's life. Couldn't you write a wonderful story about Doc? I mean, 60 years, the small town doctor, pillar of the community. Friend to those who have no friend, enemy to those who make him an enemy, says Salinger in a good imitation of a radio announcer. That's cruel, but accurate. Nobody cares anymore. Half the communities in North America have a Doc Graham. We've come up here and spaded up people's memories of Doc, but what we've uncovered is all good. No paramours, no drunken binges, no opium habit, no illegitimate children, no crazy wife locked in the attic, no shady financial dealings, no evicting orphans or midnight abortions. Jerry stops and shakes his head wearily. It's a sad time when the world won't listen to stories about good men. It's one of the reasons I don't publish anymore. Oh, but you should. You should. Look, I want to show you something. I dig frantically through the compartments of my wallet, past shining master charge and oil company credit cards, past a picture of Karen, her baby face smiling from inside a white bonnet, past various pictures of Annie, her red hair shimmering, Annie in pigtails standing beside her father's 1950 Ford. Annie is a cheerleader for West High in Iowa City. Annie pregnant, looking as if she's hugging a watermelon. Annie all in denim, smiling at me in that way she has. From inside one of the plastic folder holders, I produce a ratty clipping and thrust it at Salinger. You do something in your stories that few writers do well, especially today, and that is to make the reader love your characters. They exude a warm glow. They are so real, so vulnerable, so good, that they remind me of that side of human nature which makes living and loving and striving after dreams worth the effort. I, for one, came away with a delicious smile on my face and a soft little tear in my eye. And I felt pretty damn good about being alive for the rest of the day. Thank you. Have you ever seen that before? I asked. No. It's an excerpt from a fan letter to you. I cut it out of the Saturday Evening Post in 1957, and I've carried it with me ever since. How can you not publish when people love you so? But Salinger only smiles sadly and continues to shake his head. What are we doing here? I keep asking myself. Dispatched blind like a taxi, given only the number of a house, we root in the memories of the people of Chisholm, just like the gargantuan machines that open and upend the earth outside of town. We are dredging up the past and laying it out in the sunshine to dry. The house on our farm in Iowa is nearly 100 years old, and several times when Annie and I have dug in the backyard, guessing at where the garbage piles must have been, we have come up with wonderful pieces of glass, old dishes, crockery, and above all, bottles. Blues, greens, rubies, small triangular bottles, dimpled long neck bottles the color of ice, round milk bottles with the name of the dairy permanently imprinted on them. There was once a bottle manufacturer in Iowa City, and many of the bottles we unearth are unique and invaluable. Annie has filled the back windows of the sun porch with them after washing and polishing them, and they sit in rows like soldiers from different armies, the evening sun flashing off their surfaces. Here in Chisholm, we take the memories we unearth and carry them back to the motel, recording them, storing them until we feel the presence moving, the voices whispering, growing in momentum like a breeze turning into the wind. What's going to happen? Says Jerry. He brushes his hand across the seat of a chair before he sits down. Something, I say, for that is all I know. We are mixing a cocktail of memories and history and love and imagination. Now, We must wait and see what effect it will have on us. He always carried an umbrella and was always losing them, says a voice that filters into my dreams. Businesses around town would just lean his umbrella somewhere near the door. If anybody asked, they'd just say, "Oh, that's Doc's umbrella." And I dreamed too of Annie. Behind our house, 100 yards or so, is a collapsing building. Its unpainted wood ages to the softness of owl feathers. Annie loves old buildings. It was perhaps a granary or a hen house once, but stood abandoned for years until, as if nature had given it a gentle karate chop, the roof collapsed in the middle, sinking slowly downward like an old camel attempting to kneel. It rots with dignity into the earth. A window is now at ground level, and the stranglegrass, bent by evening breezes, peers inside. Late one evening, I looked out and saw Annie standing in the knee-high grass, her hands in the back pockets of her jeans, staring dreamily at the building. I joined her and slipped an arm around her waist as I did so. "Oh, love," she says, turning and laying her head on my chest. "One day I want to travel around the country in no hurry at all. I want to stop and explore old buildings, walk through them and listen to my footsteps. Funny old houses with porch pillars and turrets." On our honeymoon in New England, we passed an elegant old home painted in olive green with white trim and shutters and a turret, like a medieval castle, obviously unused. "Maybe we could rent the turret," I said to Annie. "I'll bet the lady who owns it has her hair in a tight bun and hasn't smiled since 1933. I can just hear you. 'Excuse me, ma'am, may we rent your turret?' Why, young man, I'm shocked. I'm not that kind of girl." Okay. That's an interesting little interlude, and it's his dream. So did it really happen, or is it just in the dream? I don't know. All right, you guys. Thank you for joining me. Oh, I'm so sorry. We know, if you've seen the movie or read the book already, we know that some interesting things are getting ready to happen. So come on back to the next video and we'll see if those things happen. All right, you guys. Thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.